Our final monologue tonight was written by Mark Matusek. Mark is a New York-based writer, has contributed to Newsweek, Harper's Bazaar, The New Yorker, just to name a few. His articles and books have covered topics from pop culture and psychology to philosophy and religion. Mark is currently the creative director of V-Men and will shortly publish 10 Ways to Be a Man, which will serve as, starting next year, the artistic vehicle for this show. So this will be the last time, probably, you will hear these monologues in V-Men. Portraying Mark tonight will be Michael Ugrin. Michael was born in Passaic, New Jersey, and has lived up and down the East Coast. He has been in over 20 theatrical productions, ranging from Macbeth to Beyond Therapy to Jesus Christ Superstar. Our final performer tonight, Michael Ugrin.
I grew up in estrogen overload, in a house filled with difficult women. The only son of a harridan who'd sent her husband, my father, packing for love of another married man. We were poor, not ghetto poor, but borderline white trash Jewish poor. My mother, my three troubled sisters, and me in our three small, underfurnished rooms. For a long time, but truthfully my entire life, I've convinced myself that this single fact of my childhood, this isolation with too many women, just a picture of a lost sperm circling an ovum, was the most formative piece of my story. Hands down, the twist that made me and formed my sperm-headed view of the world. Then one day I found out that, well, this was a lie. Or should I say, an incomplete truth. I was in my shrink's earth-toned womb of an office. Martha was asking about my mother, who looms like Medusa over my insides, turning traitorous thoughts into stone. She knew about Ida already, of course, but it wasn't until that day that the question of rape was on the table. Ida was raped many times in her life, as a big-breasted girl running fast with Italians, as a teenage bride bartered to a sadist to save what was left of her reputation, as a woman whose integrity, such as it was, centered in her own mind around being first and foremost an excellent fuck. These were the painful details I was sharing with Martha when she scrunched up her face all of a sudden and stopped me. "Your mother was raped?" she asked. "All the women in my family were raped," I told her. Martha seemed shocked. I was shocked myself. Not because the information was new, because I'd never said it out loud, which meant that it only half existed. Now that it did, and now that I'd said it, a truth so obvious that I'd missed it, just blasted a hole through my storyline, the version of things that I had believed to be true. It wasn't being trapped in a house filled with women that had made me the very strange person that I was. It was growing up in a house full of raped women. The nightmarish reel of flashbacks began, looking into Martha's eyes. The pictures of naked female flesh, the pornographized landscape of childhood. But these pictures revealed themselves differently now. Not as women whorishly wasting themselves, as it was described to me when I was a boy. Not spreading themselves uncontrollably, prompting despair and abandonment. But as their bodies probably were. Accosted, betrayed, chewed up, and discarded, largely against their will. The images came back to me in a rush. My mother, locked in the bathroom, weeping, hitting her head against the bathtub and whispering, "I want to die," as I beat on the door and screamed until it opened. And her staring at me with dead eyes, a trickle of blood sliding down her neck from hitting her head against the enamel. My beloved eldest sister, Marcia, escaping from the husband who beat and degraded her, bound and gagged her, and then dumped her for another woman, and prompted her suicide at 29. My other older sister, Joyce, sneaking past, being chased past my bedroom door in the middle of the night, some strange man's voice coaxing, "I'm not going to rape you." And then her disappearing at 15 to a home for unwed mothers. My baby sister, Belle, in hysterics at 10, crying to me that the neighbor whose kids she babysat had been touching her in the bad place. Wrong. And me confronting him, age 13, with a barbecue skewer on his patio. These memories were just the beginning. There were more. There were echoes. The rapes continued, first by men, but soon enough by themselves. As my mother and sisters, they sold themselves short. They raped their own choices, their integrity, their potential, forced themselves into too small, tawdry men, or tawdry lives with men who used them as pleasure mules. The pictures that came back, and as I described them, revealing so much more of the truth, a disturbingly different, more accurate picture began to emerge in myself, of myself. It wasn't estrogen overload that had turned me into a rescue artist. It was rape overload, abuse overload, an excess of feminine self-mutilation, an absence of innocent love toward a woman. Nowhere in retrospect was there a memory of woman beloved, exalted, or blessed. Nowhere a memory of image of feminine eros protected, beloved, refined, rendered precious. And nowhere an entry for me to learn to love in a way a boy or man needs to love in order to free himself of guilt. The guilt of not saving what he cannot save. The shame of needing to run away because he cannot face the unsavable women. The disgrace of being forced to choose between himself, his life, and the women whose sacrifice freezes his heart, the heart he needs to survive with despair. Because these women were all I had. I loved them in spite of everything beyond words. For a long time, that love was just too much to face in light of the safety I could not give them. This was the actual bone-true story I realized after that day in Martha's office. I hadn't run away out of hatred. I'd run away from an excess of love. Now, this was shocking to me, this unmasking of grief. My armorial manhood began to unclench, forced me to feel their violation, to feel the assault on these women I cherish. It's far easier to blame the victims than to share their helplessness, I realized. But telling the secret, I had no choice. There was nothing left to hate now, except for violence itself. Nothing to despise but men out of control, which plunged me into the heart of the matter. If men were rapists, and so was I, my childish black and white logic had told me this long before I even had words for these things. As a fatherless kid, starved for any male virtue to believe in, some faith in this sex that I was born with, this stranger, I had blocked the truth to save the faith that men could also be good and trusted, that I would never inflict such pain. We do this, we men, very often, I think. Every day, in every country, for every reason the mind can invent for why the violence is deserved. If Eve isn't guilty, somehow, we wager, bringing the blood on her own head. well, Adam cannot rule the world. And so the blame-shifting lie continues till one day, if we're lucky and ready, we men drop the stories. We begin to grieve. And then the cycle, ignorance, come undone. I tell my story differently now if anybody wanted to hear it. I come from a family of raped women, but that no longer makes me a rapist. It makes me a man with a broken heart. I come from a family where cocks were weapons, but that does not make me a war machine. It makes me a man with a dangerous power. Women have their own dark ways, equally fierce and beautiful. And now that I've grown to be a man, now that I know that I'm able to love, I can say what men do without hating myself or mistaking my power for violence. The tenderness of wolves, they call it. This exquisite absence of blood among killers. This is the tenderness that men can give to women. This is the story when shame finally ends. Thank you.